Thank you so much for joining us, and welcome to Gray Associates Demand for Higher Education Programs webinar for February. We are going to be covering programs that are of particular interest to community colleges. Today, we'll be going over data trends through January. A few housekeeping items to get started with. At the bottom of your screen, there is a place labeled Q&A. If you have any questions, please feel free to click on the Q&A at the bottom of your screen and add your questions there. We will get to as many as we can during the session, and we'll follow up later with you if we run out of time. Have you been wondering about launching a particular new program or what the potential job market looks like for your students? At the end of this presentation, we'll give you the opportunity to review programs in real time with PES and Gray's Director of Customer Success. You can pop your program request into the Q&A at any time during the presentation. And without further ado, I will turn things over to our CEO and founder, Bob Atkins.
Welcome, everybody. This is Bob Atkins, and thank you very much for joining me today for our look at the market for associates and certificate programs in the United States. It also could consider this demand for higher education programs at community colleges. Now, I know many of you have been looking hard to try and find ways to increase enrollment. Overall enrollment in the community college sector is actually down 9%. So let me explain as we go through this, places to look to find growth opportunities. And our particular focus on this right now is at the program level. To find good programs, you need to understand the markets for an academic program. That is, how many students are looking for it? What do employers want? What are the margins on that program? So you build programs that can contribute to the overall health of the institution. And importantly, fund other programs that may be critical to your mission or your community, but don't pay for themselves. Academic standards have to be met. We need to be sure students are graduating at a reasonable rate and that nurses are passing the NCLEX and such. And finally, of course, alignment with the mission to make sure that the programs we're offering are consistent with what the institution is intended to do. Now, that's the data side of it. Can't really be done just with data. There's no algorithm to tell you what programs to offer. So when you think about a program evaluation system, it has to include not only data on markets, margins, academic standards, and mission. By the way, if you need to remember that, you can always think of MAM, M-M-A-M. You also have to have the right people involved in the right process. Otherwise, the recommendations get caught up in internal politics, legitimate issues of joint governance and processes that may get skipped and so forth. So getting the process right, having it be open, transparent, involve the right people is a critical part of having an overall effective program evaluation system. I should mention too that people view program evaluation often as a episodic event. Once in a while we do it, maybe every 2 or 3 years, maybe it's required every 5 years by accreditors. That is a fundamental misconception. That might have been fine, 20 years ago, when markets were moving a little more slowly than they are today. But certainly the volatility of our markets leading into COVID and then disturbed by COVID and then recovering from COVID, the changes that are happening out there and what students want and what employers need are happening extremely rapidly. And you really need to be looking at much of this data at least quarterly, and there are institutions who look at certain aspects of the data monthly. So it's more than just every once in a while evaluation. It really requires ongoing program evaluation and management if you're going to keep up with what's going on in the marketplace and begin to stem some of the enrollment challenges that we're seeing. So as we go through today, keep in mind that we want to give everybody a chance to see their program of interest. So let us know any programs you'd like to have a look at in the chat section. If we don't get to your program, we'll send a program scorecard after the webinar. Now, we're going to look at these at a national level, just to be clear. It takes too long in the systems to pull up each local market. So we'll stick at the national level, both for things we cover today, as well as anything we send out to you afterwards. But feel free to put program ideas you want some information on in the chat, and we'll have a look at them. Now, let's talk about student demand a little bit. There are a lot of misconceptions about student demand. Probably the most important one is people don't really take it actively into consideration when they're evaluating academic programs, particularly in the community college sector. In my experience, there's overemphasis on employers. Now, that's not to say employers aren't important, but they really truly aren't the only thing you have to consider. Otherwise, it's very easy to launch programs and find no students in them. At a community college I spoke to recently, they had launched a program in optics, as I recall. They'd gotten $500,000 of investments raised to build an optics lab, and they had 5 students show up. That's just not a good outcome for the students, for the employers, for the community, or the college. So you not only need to take into account employment, you also have to have good data on student demand. Now, oftentimes people look at iPads to find out how many students graduated or completed this program, which is great, except that iPads is pre-COVID data, really. The most current iteration is from 2021. And the people who graduated chose their programs somewhere between 2 and 4 years before that for an associate's program. So we're looking at data from 2019 at best, and 2017 and closer to a worst case scenario. So it's really very out of date. It's great for long-term trends. It's great for an understanding of who your competition is and that sort of thing, because it's very complete, but it's really not good if you want to understand what students are interested in now. Enrollment is very good data. It's also comprehensive. We get it from the National Student Clearinghouse. It's available to you as well. And that is, for us at least, we have it updated through spring of this year. It updates 3 times a year. So it's really telling you what's happening pretty much now or a few months ago in the market. Google, on the other hand, is forward-looking. They're telling you what people will want who are thinking about enrolling in school over the next 3 to 12 months or 18 months, depending on the degree level. So if you think about it that way, it's very helpful when you interpret the data. iPads, good for long-term trends, but dated. Enrollment, very good for what's happening right now. And if you want to know what students are in the market now are thinking about, but haven't enrolled in yet, that's Google. So let's take a look at those data sources and see what they say. Starting with completions, the largest associate's programs in the United States, if you can't name these off the top of your head, are registered nursing and business. No surprises there. I personally was a little surprised to see biology towards the top of this list. Then we have criminal justice, humanities and humanistic studies, psychology, social sciences, bookkeeping and accounting tech, please send one my way, computer science, health services, and allied health. Now notice we've excluded liberal arts and general studies. Those are extremely large programs, probably number 1 and 2 if we put them on the list, but they don't really focus people in any specific area. So we've left them off this list, but don't mistake that for them being small or unimportant programs. When we look at the certificate level, licensed practical nurse, vocational nurse has the highest number of completions. You can see a trend here around nursing, unless that leads you to conclude that the nursing market is saturated. Last time I checked, there were 7 job opportunities for every nurse. So we're still living with a shortage of nurses post-COVID and need everybody we can get coming through these programs, whether that's an LPN or associate's ADN or a bachelor's in nursing. We need them all. And frankly, we need graduate students in nursing as well. Then business administration management's number 2, no surprising there. And then we see 4 CTE programs: welding, auto mechanic tech, cosmetology, and electrician. And we'll actually focus in on electrician a little bit later in our presentation. Then we have our health contenders. I mentioned LPN. We also have medical assisting and EMT paramedic. I find medical assisting personally very interesting. I've been watching this program now for close to 8 years. It used to have order of magnitude about 250, 300,000 completions a year. And now we're down to under 60,000 a year in the US. Meantime, the demand for medical assistants has gone up. So at one time, there was really an oversupply. There were a lot of for-profits graduating medical assistants without enough jobs to really take care of all of them. That's no longer the case. So this is a very interesting program if you're looking for something that's large and of immediate interest and gets people out working more or less right away. It's about the fastest path from training to a job that you can find. Then we see bookkeeping again, and criminal justice, police science among the highest enrollment certificate programs. Now, as we look at enrollment, so now we're moving a little bit forward. We've looked at completions. Now we're looking at what people are actually looking for a few months ago and what they're enrolled in now. Cybersecurity is number 1. You can see by a long ways. Real estate was number 2. Funeral and service and mortuary science, to my surprise, is number 3. One of my clients has a very healthy well, it's a funny word to use in mortuary science, but healthy growing program there. Health and wellness, general, computer support specialist, digital arts. Diagnostic medical sonography is a pretty interesting one to see this kind of growth. This is a fairly demanding program. Takes a couple of years to get through. Very good career opportunities and good pay on the other side. Then something you'll see a couple of times in the presentation, electrical power transmission installation general. Not sure what's going on there, but there seems to be an uptick in interest. Building, construction, site development, and finally health services, allied health general. Now we've got our certificates. I think an important thing to note here at the certificates level is, and this is true to a degree at the associate level as well, the cutoff here for the top 10 is 1% growth. On the associate side, it was 2% growth. So the implication there is that only 10 programs at the certificate level are growing 1% or more, which is very troubling because we've got a lot of that are declining. So these programs, we need a lot more programs that are growing in order to offset the declines that are further down on the list. Number 1, customer service and support call center. So 27% growth there. Health information records tech up 8%. You can see real estate up 7%. A couple of CTE programs, commercial truck and bus driver, and we'll see that come back again later. And here's our electrical power and transmission installer general up 4%. We saw on the prior page as well. We got a couple of healthcare things, 4 of them actually towards the bottom of this list: medical office, home health aid, medical billing and coding, and dental assistant. And in the middle there, you see legal assistant paralegal as a good certificate program. By the way, that certificate is often earned after a bachelor's degree, since in some states there's licensure required for paralegals, but typically they're going to have a 4-year degree before they attempt to achieve licensure. Now, let's, after all the doom and gloom about enrollment in community colleges, I thought we'd take a look and see what Google suggests the interest is in this space. So here we're looking at Google search volume, associate and below, and we're beginning to have 3 years of data for this data set: 2021 in the dark blue, 2022 in the light blue, and 2023 in what I would call teal over here on the left. And what we're hoping for is the size of the bars to get higher as they get lighter. So dark, we want the light blue bar to be above the dark blue bar and the teal bar to be above light blue. That would imply we'd had growth in all 3 years. And in fact, this year we did have growth. We're up 21%. Year over year in search volume for degrees and certificates, associate level and below. So despite everything you've been hearing and even the enrollment that you've been experiencing out there, it looks to me as though things are starting to get better. And you can see that's been pretty consistent year over year data since last March. We're up every single month during this period. And this month is one of the faster growth rates. So I believe this is encouraging for the community college sector. And I hope you all are starting to experience that in your enrollment. What's hot? So let's start with highest volume of keyword searches. So these, if you will, are the biggest programs in terms of keyword searches. Cosmetology, top of the pack. Commercial truck and bus driver, number 2. Let me take a moment on this program because it's one we happen to have worked on a few times. It's a very intriguing program. It's surprisingly easy to set up. Payment is different than normal programs. You're not going to get this paid for primarily with Title IV funding. Typically, this is going to be job retraining money. So you got to go to your local employment office to get the any sort of financial support for the folks in this program. It's very short, a lot of volume of people through the program. And of course, when they're done, by the way, they're still typically going to have to go through more training at any trucking company they might join. But it is a relatively short way to get somebody out and working again. It is not expensive to set up. A lot of mythology on that. I always assumed, well, at least I assumed that you would have to buy trucks. That's really not the case. You can lease the trucks and have this stood up really quite quickly. There is some approval required, but it's not as onerous as most programs you're accustomed to trying to get started. So an interesting one. Not revenue per student is not that high. But again, you can run a large volume of students through because the course is relatively short. Medical clinical assistant, we see number 3. EMT paramedic, number 4. We've got one more healthcare, medical billing and coding. in number 7, make that 6. And then we've got a couple of other CTEs, electrician, nail specialist, manicurist, HVAC, cooking and relating culinary arts, all making our top 10 in terms of volume of interest. And there's legal paralegal making the list as well with 61,870 searches during this month. And just a little bit on this data set, we keep track of searches for 900 academic programs. They represent well over 90% of all completions in the United States. And we keep track of approximately 20 keywords per program. So that does vary. Some programs don't really have 20 keywords to look at. So it's a very robust database, and it's been, now we've got at least 5 years of trailing data if anybody's interested in looking at trends. And in our systems, you can pull this out and look specifically at searches by program or keyword. Now, what's growing? Culinary arts, number 1 by a walkaway here, up 135% in terms of search volume in January. MRI tech, interestingly, up 59%. 3 more CTE programs, electrician there at number 3, nail specialist, manicurist at number 8, and HVAC maintenance tech made the list with 24% growth. Little bit of healthcare here, not as much as I would normally expect. I mentioned MRI tech up 59%, and medical billing and coding up 40%. When I look at these fast growing lists, I'm used to seeing a lot of allied health, and I'm not seeing as much of that here. There is one that's miscoded, actually. Allied health medical assisting services here at 25% growth should be a healthcare program as well. So we've got 3 of the top 10 that's healthcare. Oftentimes that's more like 5. CTE is getting a little bit better representation. And then we have other, which is our biggest category here. No surprise, we've still got interest in computer installation repair. Physical fitness tech is one I haven't seen before. Bookkeeping and accounting, that makes sense, especially as we come into tax season. And allied health and medical assisting services, again, probably it should be a healthcare program, shows up on our list with 25% growth. Now, what costs money to get? What really drives this is the degree to which these programs are offered online and or by online for-profits, where they really bid incredible prices to get these students. So here we're looking at medical billing and coding with a cost per click of $38.48. Now, a word of caution. That does not mean that you can get a medical billing and coding student for $38.48. The odds of us lead one of these Google searches converting into a student are best case 1 in 100. So that cost for a million billing and coding student here is $3,800, and that might be viewed as a floor per student, not a ceiling, if you will. It could be higher. So keep in mind that to get to a student, you're going to have to multiply any of these numbers by, let's say 100, might be more, seldom going to be much less than that. Depends a little bit on your brand. And you can see accounting in number 2, but even at the bottom of this list at $20 a lead, we're talking very expensive stuff to compete. If you want to attract students online using keyword search advertising. But what's the point here? This is a very good metric if you're trying to understand how competitive a program is. So whether or not you choose to compete, you can look at this, at these numbers and say, okay, what am I up against? And where this is bid very high, you know you're in a field that's very intense competitively. And of course, you can pull this not just nationally the way we do, but also as we do for your local market, because while it may be competitive nationally, some of these programs like aircraft tech that require physical work often compete more in local markets. So the local market pricing could be very different than what we're seeing here at the national level. Again, that's in our systems too, but difficult to share that for all the markets in the United States in a webinar. So it just gives you an idea of competitiveness. When we look at, and really here's the big transition. Now we're leaving Google and looking at another thing we consider a forward-looking indicator, which is what are the less than degree programs that are attracting students now? So this is all that stuff you hear about. What should I be teaching for certificates or night programs, if you will, or online, where people are looking for a credential, but not necessarily a degree. Number 1 in a walkaway right now is data analysis. If you rolled the clock back a year or two, it would have been software development, and data analysis would have made the list, but way down. So this is really a big and growing opportunity. Software development remains large, but don't forget, personal development is number 3 as a category and very close in size to software development. This is courses like happiness or, having a more fulfilling life. So keep that in mind. There's a lot you could potentially be doing in teaching these courses about how to survive psychologically in today's world, because there are a lot of people out there who are hurting or interested in taking those, and others who are interested in taking them because they recognize the importance of having a well-developed toolkit to maintain your own psychological equilibrium, if you will, and be able to understand what it is that will create a happy and rewarding life. Then we see a logical one, business essentials, learning English, a language, which I think most of this is English as a second language, foreigners taking these programs online in the US, but still very big area, one worth thinking about. Leadership and management, machine learning, music and art, mobile and web development, and basic science. So those are the top 10 categories within Coursera. Now, we switch over to Udemy, and Udemy is a more technical platform. So, and here we're looking not at the category level, but at individual courses. Give you ideas of things you might be able to roll out as well. Python for data science, Microsoft Excel. I'll do my plug here. If you don't have a very good, pervasive training and use of Excel in your academic programs, you're really making a mistake. When I've looked at skills, Excel is in the top 10 skills for almost every job in the United States besides bricklayer. And even there, chances are they're going to have to enter their hours in Excel or something like it, for those that aren't still trying to keep track of it on a piece of paper. So keep in mind, it's like literacy at this point. You have to know Excel to do almost anything in an office environment, but it's one of the top 10 skills required in nursing as well. Then we've got Python again. So that's a big software language right now. Web Developer Bootcamp, the complete digital marketing course, 12-in-1. React, that's a software development language. Angular, new AWS certified cloud practitioner. Let me pause on this one. AWS is Amazon Web Services. That is a huge cloud-based service provider. So many companies keep their data on the AWS cloud, and they have to operate servers and other equipment, if you will, storage devices in AWS, which makes it relatively easy to do. Well, relative to what is a great question. That's relative to setting up a room full of servers and storage devices yourself, which gets very difficult as it gets bigger and is difficult to scale in the first place. AWS is not easy. And so there's a whole bunch of language you need to learn, not really so much coding language, but terminology in order to understand what's even happening on AWS and to configure and keep running these systems and to optimize them so you're not paying for stuff you're not really using. So a lot of opportunity there. The reason I really focused on it, though, is AWS, at least until recently, and this is changing very fast with the decline in the tech programming world, is willing to pay for people to learn this. So, and they're willing to pay colleges to teach it. So if you haven't reached out to your big tech guys to see if they're interested in helping you with funding development of programs that are organized around their particular tech stack, well worth doing. Google is still spending money to teach people how to run the Google Cloud, and Microsoft is interested in people who know how to run Azure. That's their cloud services operation. Because if people don't know how to operate those environments, then clients are likely to shift or make their initial decision to which cloud to join based on where they can find the people they need in order to run the cloud operation. So big area, lots of money chasing it, and still opportunities, I think, to find funding for your programs and even for your students one at a time. Then a little bit further out there, ethical hacking, and finally Java programming from beginner to advanced. So again, Udemy, very technical. This is a way of finding out which particular technologies are hot right now, and you may want to add to existing courses or create new courses for them. Employment, what's going on out there? Well, for those of you who are keeping track of the economy, it's kind of good news and bad news. We're seeing a little decline in job postings, But we have this weird phenomena right now where the long-term, medium-term growth of the economy, people seem to think is going to be stronger if we have lower employment growth. Okay, we've got to wrap our heads around that a little bit. The premise is that if the employment growth doesn't go down, if job postings don't go down, and actually get to the point where we're shedding jobs in the US, which we're not right now by a long shot, 500,000 added in January, as I recall, that the inflation will continue. And if the Federal Reserve believes that inflation will continue, then they're going to raise interest rates, and that's going to precipitate a recession. So in a sense, if you want the economy to grow, this school of thought would say you've got to see job postings decline, so the Fed's less nervous, inflation is less of an issue, and they'll take their foot off, the Fed will take its foot off the brakes and allow the economy to grow. So it's very confusing right now. I look back at month over month growth in GDP in inflation in the US, and month over month, it was actually inflation was declining for 5 or 6 months prior to January. And I thought maybe we're through the worst of it, but then in January, it jumped up 0.5 point. So that decline turned out to be, if you will, a head fake. In any case, we are seeing a slight decline in job postings, but still very healthy levels of job postings overall. In January, the most frequently posted job was retail salesperson. So we're seeing this basically as a bounce back from COVID as the surviving retail stores begin to restaff themselves. Customer service representatives, very similar. We see a third sales rep, wholesale manufacturing with 5,500 job postings. Then we see some really just a grab bag of other things. Perhaps the most interesting here is to notice that healthcare is not really that present on the list, and it usually is. Yeah, we've got registered nursing there, nursing assistants that make the list. Registered nursing there number 4, and nursing assistants in the 10th spot, still one of the top 10. But again, I'd normally expect to see this list heavily populated with healthcare, 3 or 4 of the top positions, and it's only 2 right now. Jobs for admin assistants, preschool teachers, computer user support specialists, and first-line supervisors of production and operating workers. So I look at this and I say, in general, restaffing the United States, whether that's at the individual retail salesperson level for customer service, or the managers who are going to have to take care of those and supervise those people. And of course, healthcare is still a huge issue for us. In January, in terms of highest job posting volume by occupation, number 1 was first-line supervisors of food prep. And sorry, this is growth now. Maintenance and repair workers were way up at 28% growth. Hotel, motel, resort, here again, we're seeing bounce back from COVID. 10% increase in job postings for nursing assistants, and an 8% increase in retail. Then we quickly get to things that are actually declining, given that the overall average is declining. That's not too surprising. Computers, user support specialists, insurance agents, social and human services. And there at the bottom list, you can see medical assistants off 5%. Now let's take a little bit of a dogleg right, if you will. There are more than just academic programs at an institution. There are also athletic programs. And the two are far more intertwined than one might think at first. I'm often sort of misled by high-end D1 athletics, University of Alabama playing football and what that represents, and the limited interaction really there between the academic purpose of the institution and the immense amount of money generated from a relatively small number of students and coaches for that sports program. In most cases, athletics is a much more organic part of the institution, and it comes with highly varied economics. So I was going to do a little quiz here and ask you what you think the most expensive sport is. Personally, I wouldn't have guessed bowling, either as being that significant or being this expensive. It is actually the most expensive sport per team in the United States. Then there comes a second implausible entry with archery as the second most expensive. Before I go any further down the list, though, I went and ran this down the other day to see what's driving it. And it's very different by sport. But if you pick archery as an example, the problem isn't that the sport is intrinsically expensive to run. Arrows aren't that expensive and they can be reused. Targets, ditto, they're not that expensive and either can be reused or disposed of, replaced at pennies to put up another sheet of paper on a target. What makes this expensive is relatively few participants per coach. One of the particular ones I looked at had one archery athlete in it and one coach. So much like course economics, you have to be very careful in sports that you have enough participants and enough activity to defray the cost of the program itself, in particular coaching. Then we can see rodeo, basketball. Now that's one I expected to be expensive. I was surprised to see how far down the list football actually is. And then we have tennis, swimming, and the least expensive in our top sports, cross country, with only $3,900 per team. That's, I'm looking down the men's side, but the results are very similar for women's sports, frankly. Bowling number 1, archery number 2. There must be something about archery I don't understand, but I think it's small team size. You see golf makes the top 3 there. And then a familiar set of names: basketball, rodeo, track and field. And we have 2 women's only sports, volleyball and softball, that make the top 10 in terms of cost per team. Now, the question then becomes, okay, well, we're spending that money, what are we getting? And on average, if you look at it, we've got 19 participants on a team, 3 coaches for those 19 participants. So only 6 participants per coach. So right away, that's a red flag to me that we may be, if you will, overcoached here. Expenses per participant, $3,600. And it's percentage of enrollment. That is a percentage of students who are in sports as a percentage of total enrollment, 6%, and 145 community college that are enrolled in the community college division athletics area. So that varies a lot, that 6% number. So we've got the highest participation rate at Compton College was 73%, and Yakima Valley Community College is one of the top 10 at 33%. So there is an opportunity here for many community colleges to pick the sports that have, and to manage sports in a way that they can have relatively low cost to operate and still attract students to the institution. And there are a couple of reasons for doing this. One, of course, is to improve enrollment. 2 is often folks who come in for sports actually have a better academic profile than I might have expected, at least. I talked to a lot of schools where the student athletes have higher GPAs and, importantly, higher completion rates than non-athletes. So the sport, if you will, is an anchor to the institution. It gives them a group of friends, and it gives them some discipline and often some coaching guidance to make sure they complete their academic assignments. So overall, it can be a positive contributor to academics. And actually, I think if you look at $3,500 per student, that's probably a little high to make the margins work. But very often the net contribution to the institution, when you consider their tuition that's generated, is very positive. So it's an important potential driver of growth if you haven't already looked at your sports teams and tried to pick out ones where you want long roster, low cost. So that's where something like track and field can come in. Probably not bowling, and God forbid you think about hockey. Very expensive sport to run. So let's take a look at our program of the month. We're going to look at 4 aspects of the market for this program: student demand, employment, competition, and degree fit. The particular program we've chosen ranks out at the national level as one of the top 10. In fact, it's number 4, Electrician. When you add up on our scoring system and say, okay, at the associate's level or below, what programs score highest overall? That's a combination of student demand metrics, competitive metrics, employment percentiles, and then fit with the associate's level degree or below. When we do things with color coding, you'll notice in that prior page, almost everything there was dark green. That means it's in the 98th percentile or higher. You might well ask, percentile of what? This is 1,500 programs that we keep track of. So if it's in the top 2%, it's one of the top 30 programs out of the 1,500 we track. And that would get it a dark green rating. And you can see it basically goes from darker to lighter in pink. Green is good, pink is not great. So keep that in mind as we look through the numbers. It gives you a quick way of looking at the data and understanding where there are areas of strength and weakness. So we're going to start with student demand. And over here, we can see the percentile. So this particular program scores at the 98th percentile, dark green, for Google search volume with 345,000 searches nationwide in the prior 3 months. That earned it 8 points. And the points are a system set up that, in this case, we're using one of our standard ones. It can be customized or adapted to your institution as you see fit. I'm going to skip over international page views. We don't have any of those for this particular program. And look at new student enrollment, also very high, 98th percentile. On-ground completions at in-market institutions, that is within the country, 19,000, almost 20,000 completions, again at the 98th percentile. Online, not so great. Not surprising for electrician. I'm really glad not too many people are learning to be electricians without actually having touched the wire. But just 5 there, 69th percentile. And we look at the total on-ground and online, we've got 98th percentile. Very large program, however you cut it, except it is not at this point an online program. All my growth metrics here in terms of unit volume growth are 98th percentile or better. So it is a big program growing at a healthy clip. And you can see that over here, 12% growth, 19% growth, even completion volume is up 5%. That is in the top 23% of programs on Google search growth. Top 21%, 80th percentile, that is 79th, for new student enrollment growth year over year. So these are very healthy growth numbers. Now, how can we interpret the difference between the completion volume growth, the Google search growth, the new student enrollment? The way I would look at this is I'd say previously enrollment completions were up only 5%. So there was less interest in this program in the past than there is today. In fact, today it's up 19%. And looking forward, that growth may slow a little bit, but still looks very healthy at 12%. So it's when I look at these 3 numbers, I put them back in a row in terms of the funnel and say, okay, prior 5%, okay, that trend is past or passing. Current 19%, it's hot right now. 12% looking forward, not quite that hot, but still very healthy. Now, as we look at the raw numbers, new student enrollment here is up 18%. That's a couple thousand students between 2020 and 2021. It's a real bright spot. And I'm sorry, that's new enrollment up 18%. And that's beginning to drive up total enrollment here from 50 to 54,000. So if that trend persists, I would expect total enrollment to continue to rise as those new students enter the institution. And the number of graduates is, relatively speaking, lower than the new entrants. Now let's take a look at jobs. On the job front, we've got job postings overall, 50,000. That is 88th percentile. So we're talking the top 12% of all programs. A lot of people physically employed in this field, according to BLS, 96th percentile, almost 800,000 electricians across the United States. And BLS says there are 87,000 job openings. That is due to growth and replacement. A little bit of a shaky metric, just so you all know. I can talk about that more if anybody's interested. Job postings, pretty healthy. Almost 90th percentile here. 50,000 job postings last year. Growth down a little bit. We're starting to see the peak in housing coming through here and construction. As almost all of you know, the increase in interest rates has begun to dampen demand for U.S. housing and construction. So while it's still very healthy in terms of overall volume, it's beginning to come down in terms of overall employment. Our historical growth rates, 1.2%, and BLS anticipates that it's going to be up 0.8% over the next 10 years. That's not a very useful number, guys. I know many schools look at the BLS growth rate and base decisions on it. Unfortunately, 82% of those forecasts are off by 50% or more. So don't build your castle on that sand. You need other metrics to confirm growth and potentially your own estimates, and talk to your own local employers to understand what's happening in the market and put together your best estimate of what the real growth rate is going to be around you. The underlying problem is that the U.S. economy is too complicated to forecast, let alone in 800 occupations. So I couldn't do better. But on the other hand, I know that you shouldn't overweight that number when you're thinking about what to do with your academic programs. Job postings per graduate, healthy, about average actually, but still 2.5 job postings per graduate. And BLS job openings, 4.4. And one of the reasons I said to be careful with this is part of that 4.4 number is based on the 10-year growth forecast. So if that's wrong, this is wrong. So just be cautious with that number. Wages are good, but not great. Well, actually, I would call okay. A little lower than I would have expected, frankly, for an electrician. I'm pretty sure you can't get one around Boston for this kind of money. But 51,000 is the mean wage for an electrician at this point. Now, what's happening to job postings? Up 4% for electricians. So despite all the other shenanigans, this is still growing overall year over year in the country. And we look at the different kinds of electrical interest. And I found this actually pretty interesting. Let me explain. So electrical apprentice, this is classic entry-level job. You're going to come in, you're going to work for an active electrician, and you're going to be their apprentice. You get paid decently, it's not great. Hourly kinds of work. And you're working on, regular 120 or higher voltages. So it's, the kind of stuff that'll blow you out of your seat if you happen to grab hold of the wires. Now, if you look down below, though, there's a pretty big shift. Fire alarm tech, alarm technician, electric sign installer, lead electric sign installer, but more, another alarm installer, fire alarm service technician, security systems installer. I bring this up because most of those have a heavy component, if not entirely, low voltage. So it's actually a little bit different field, a little bit less hairy. If you grab two ends of a low voltage wire, it'll tingle, but it's not going to give you a big jolt. And it makes it a little bit easier to teach and a little bit easier to set up in your institution. So well worth exploring. I know some schools have very successful programs in low voltage electric. For all these electrical things we're putting in our houses now, whether it's a smoke alarm or a fire alarm, that actually aren't taking 120. They're taking much less. So just keep that in mind. It's an interesting subspace within this. Electric sign installers probably playing with 120, so I should be careful there. Probably not in this group, but all these other alarms tend to run off lower voltage systems. Now, competitive intensity. We would not be the first people to think of this. 98th percentile in terms of volume of competitors in the United States with 447 institutions. Interestingly, we see 7 new institutions entering this space. So, as I said, we're not the first people to realize this might be attractive. Some other people are already getting in. But average program completions, pretty healthy at 44. I tend to focus on median because that average is typically going to be skewed upwards by a very large institution. So typical college here is graduating 15 students a year. And if you think about that over, this is going to be a 1 to 2 year program. So with some attrition, that's probably 20, 25 students in the electrical program at a given institution. Cost per click, still low. Google competition index, very low at 0.11. That's on a 0 to 1 scale where 1 is most competitive. So this is not a terribly competitive program in general. 70th percentile on cost per click. But you'll remember, you get to the top of this, you're up at $30. So compared to those, this is a relatively inexpensive program if you want to try and recruit people online. There are some online institutions, but not a whole lot of completions here yet. This is people, there are a number of people who try and teach these trades programs online. And that's what you're seeing here, but not a lot of volume. So what degree level should we be teaching? Probably not a surprising to find this is predominantly a certificate program. 87% of completions nationally are at the certificate level. Some associates, graduates, and we look at it in terms of the workforce. We've got a lot of people in here with no college, 30% with some college, and only 14% with an associate's. And a little bit of folks above that. But keep in mind, if they have an associate's, bachelor's, or master's, they probably don't have that degree in being an electrician. What they've got is some other degree, and they've decided to go back and they've learned how to be an electrician after that. So, you'll see a liberal arts major who's having trouble finding a job may ultimately become an electrician. And let me pause there. I'm sorry to say that about liberal arts. Not very correct. There are plenty of jobs for liberal arts majors, despite all the rumors to the contrary. And as a history major, I delved into this for history specifically, and we do just fine. We go into 502 occupations, and we earn on average at the 80th percentile in the United States. So This idea that liberal arts majors can't find work is largely mythology. Who becomes an electrician? And this is an important point when you're thinking about your campus over the long term and new programs to add or programs that you may decide to stop. Each of those programs has its own unique demographics. This program happens to skew white male, but it has a very healthy representation in Latinos as well, but less so in other areas and almost no women in it. I'm not saying that women shouldn't become electricians. There's really no reason why a woman can't be an electrician. But at the moment, we don't see that. So as you're planning your programs, do keep in mind which ones are likely to bring in what kind of student, so that the campus over the next 5 to 10 years has the kinds of student you're hoping for, and you don't suddenly end up with all of one type of student or all of another. Now, this is our summary scorecard, a lot of stuff on one page, but as you become skilled in reading these, by the time you've looked at 5 or 10, you can scan these pretty quickly and understand what's going on, again, focusing heavily on the colors. So this overall dark green, 99th percentile, driven heavily by student demand. Employment's good, not quite as good as student demand, but still 95th percentile, and it's quite competitive. So if I were worried about this for some particular aspect, I would say I'm worried about competition, and I'm a little more concerned about wages than I expected. You can see those 2 pinks there. I thought this was a higher paying profession than that. So again, pretty quickly, you can get good at reading this. And I missed one thing that I will point out, which is growth. We've got 98th, 99th percentile unit growth in this program on all 3 growth metrics. So let's summarize. In January, US Google searches for community college programs increased 21% year over year. So there is hope that the long decline could be coming to an end. Customer service support had the fastest annual growth. Cybersecurity had the fastest growth at the associate level. That's a program, if you don't have it, you may feel like you're too late. I don't think you are. It is a huge program, and it continues to be one of the fastest growing. And you seldom see that combination of absolute size and fast growth. The challenge is finding instructors, but there are a number of workarounds for that if you need the help. Whether you lean on outsiders to come in and teach, often have the most expertise are people actually in the field right now. And I think you find some of those, the ones who aren't too busy, may be interested in coming back and sharing your knowledge with students. Job postings were down 2% year over year in January. The highest demand overall was for retail salespersons. In 2020 to 2021, women's bowling won the cup, if you will, for highest expenses per team. It may not be the first sport you want to add, but there are sports out there where adding them can make a material contribution to your enrollment and to the overall economic health of your institution. And as we saw, demand for electrician is strong, particularly student demand and jobs. There is heavy competition. And I should also mention here, there is another type of competition. Oftentimes local unions will have their own education programs for apprentices. And you do have to think about that and check and see how you feel about competing with those folks as well. That's all I have. We're open the floor here for any questions you may have. And also would encourage you, if you have programs that you'd like us to look at, please let us know what they are. And if Winnell has joined us, he can actually guide you through those.
Yeah, I think I received a couple of requests, but feel free to drop some more in the chat here. I think the first one was culinary arts. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and I can't share my screen.
Try. If I let you share it, then you'll have better luck.
There we go. I'm going to share my screen here, and it says my screen is loading. And you should be able to see it now, correct?
Yep.
Nice. So I started off with our program rank here, which is going to give you the ability to just make sure you're not overlooking some other zip codes that might be closely related to the program that you're trying to research. In the case of culinary arts, there are a lot of programs that are kind of similar to one another. So I filtered by that 4-digit zip code here, 1205 culinary arts. And really quickly, at a high level, we can kind of see which zip code seems to be performing the best in this national market.
Now, what we might do here is, since we have an audience that's primarily focused at the associate and below level, why don't we apply the associate scoring rubric that they would have in their system?
Perfect. So for that, I'm going to come in here and select one of the predetermined scoring rubrics that we have, and we have a workforce focus rubric. And what this is going to do is it's going to place more weight on some of the metrics that speak more towards the viability of an associate's level program that specializes in workforce. I'm going to go ahead
Yeah,
and read
these are what you would call your career and technical education programs. So there are programs that are where you're not likely to be transferring into a different institution. And we score those differently than we would if you were thinking about going on and getting a bachelor's degree.
Yep. And all of a sudden you're going to see some more greens here, something like culinary arts and chef training at the 98th percentile. And at a high level, before I even get into the details, we can see a lot of student demand here for the culinary arts chef training, as well as the baking and pastry arts. So I'm going to go ahead and actually select this first one here, just based on the performance. And before I get into the scorecard, I already know I'm expecting some strength in student demand, some average employment, and something's going on with the competition that's driving this kind of pink color coding. So we're going to have to figure out what that is. It could be there's a lot of institutions that currently offer this program. It could be that the median and average program sizes are very small. So we're going to let the details of the data kind of let us know what is going on. So really quickly, for student to
go through here, if you have any questions or comments and you want to enter them in the chat, please feel free, and we'll answer them in real time.
Yep. So really quickly, student demand, we're going to categorize our data into two buckets. One is size and one is growth. In the size metrics, things are looking great. That's why we're seeing a lot of green here. Strength in Google search volumes, right? 395,000 searches. Why do I know? How do I know this is large, right? This 99th percentile is going to rank that value compared to all other programs in the market. So it's very strong. Enrollment, new student enrollment is very strong. On-ground completions, online completions, some of both are very strong. We're seeing some growth in Google searches as well as enrollment. But where things start to get a little, not as great will be here in the completion volume change in units as well as percentage, right? We're seeing a drop of 862 units. This is a 0 percentile value, meaning it's going to be one of the most drastic negative changes here in all of the market. That being said, this is a very large program to begin with. So we're also going to give you that percentage change, and the 9% decrease is less scary than, that 862 volume that we see here.
Yeah, the other thing I see when I look at it is this is a program that appears to be rebounding. Completion volume down 9%, but enrollment, a more current indicator, up 8%. And then Google search volume, a forward-looking indicator, up 18%. So this could be a bounce back from COVID, where that 9% represents the interest of students who would have had to enroll back in 2020 to complete this program, maybe 2021. It looks to me as though it's rebounding.
So student demand is looking great. We can then jump over to the right? Are students interested in this is kind of the question that you want to answer here in this first box. And then, are there jobs, essentially, is the question here on the right. And we can see, for direct prep, which this is a, direct prep focused degree here, we're going to see some strength in total job postings. We're going to see strength in BLS current employment. So how large is this field in the national market, and how many job openings is the Bureau of Labor Statistics recognizing, all scoring above the 97th percentile here. So doing very well. Our job posting totals for ACS bachelor's outcomes are also very large here, right? So jobs that might not be directly related to this field are still large. And then we're going to start seeing, well, before I jump into the pink, some more strength we see is 41.9 job postings per graduate.
Oh my God.
That's, a very good thing to see here. A lot of jobs per graduate. And then BLS job openings per graduate are also very large. So it seems like there's not enough people graduating in this field for how many jobs are out there. And
there's
then
another phenomenon here we have to keep in mind. If you look over there on the right, national at the employment statistics, I bet we're going to find, a lot of people in this field don't actually have a college degree. So the competition here is not just for graduates, but it's for all the other people who might want to do culinary who don't go to college.
Yep. And I'd be curious to see how much of this is reflected in, for example, when we look at this Google search volume of 395,000, you know, our system does have the capacity to do a deep dive into what exactly is being searched. You know, are people searching for a degree, or are people searching for classes or certificates or, you know, training, right? Might be something that is trending here into this volume. And the reason being here might be directly related to these wages. I mean, I'm not sure how much of the wages here are driven by tips in terms of a chef. I don't really know, but you know, the salary wages are looking relatively low in this case.
Very, right. We're talking second and third percentile wages. And I don't know either. I think there probably is some tip sharing with chefs. It would vary by restaurant. But not a super well-paid space.
So there are jobs, there is demand. And there's also a lot of competition, right? And why do I say that is because we see 369 campuses with graduates, right? So in the nation, there's 369 campuses reporting completions in this field. This is going to be a 97th degree value, right? So a lot of institutions in the game here. Average program completions are okay, right? In the 82nd percentile, actually relatively large at 20, but then the median here being at 7. So there could be a lot of kind of big players in this space, followed by, you know, some people trying to just keep up here. Median program.
Also, you have to remember too here, pretty expensive program to set up. A lot of equipment required. You know, you need a commercial kitchen and so forth. So this is not a cheap program to get started. So if you're going to run 7 kids through it, you're not going to be very happy about that.
And then we have the SIP description here in the middle. I think this is going to be very pivotal, right? Because sometimes you just want to make sure that the program that you're intending to research is the program that you're actually researching here, and you're aligning here to the SIP taxonomy. So we're going to give you that information here right in the middle. That's going to be a very kind of high level walkthrough of culinary arts. You know, student demand looks okay. It looks strong, actually. Employment looks, you know, okay in terms of there are jobs. The wages are not doing great. And there's a lot of folks, a lot of institutions currently in this field.
And what surprises me here actually is that it's a relatively small program on it at the median. I would expect it to be quite a bit bigger.
And then we also, just for the sake of time, I'm going to try and jump into another one here. Medical billing and coding. I'm going to go ahead and actually filter by the 4 digits here once again. So I'm going to clear out my selections for zip code here. I'm going to clear out my selections for 4-digit. The reason I'm going into the 4-digit is because I'm pretty sure there's a family of programs related to this. Again, I think we know which one is going to be the best to take a look into, but just so that we're not overlooking maybe some other programs in this field that could be performing as strongly, I'm going to go ahead and start at a macro view and then work my way down. I'm going to stop sharing my screen really quickly so that this loads. And then I will be right back.
Denise, I see you're still out there. If you'd like to ask us any questions or have a program you're interested in, please let us know.
All right, I'm coming back. Less than 1 minute. Try and beat the clock. Something's going on.
Oh, don't worry about it. And I think we'll call it quits for today. Let me just have the screen back for a moment, Winell.
Yes.
I can do that. And I hope that you'll join us again. We'll be doing the community college webinar on March 29th. And then we do bachelor's and above on March 30th, and actually be doing it tomorrow as well for the results through January. So please do join us. In the meantime, if you'd like to have a guidebook to doing data-informed program evaluation management, please feel free to go out on Amazon and buy the book, Start, Stop, or Grow. It's my baby, and love it if as people pick that up and begin to adopt these practices. Thank you very much for joining us, and look forward to speaking with you again next month.